we are now going to turn to Joanne Kyger's. It's been a long time is one name, one title. Notes from the Revolution might be the title. It might be a subtitle. And we're going to begin this conversation by asking Zach to play the audio of Joanne Kyger. I believe it's a fairly old audio. I met Joanne once, and she always, even to the end, sounded like this. But it is a young voice for sure. So, Zach, are you ready? Notes from the Revolution is how it's listed on that page. Let's do the old one and see.
Notes from the Revolution. During the beat of this story, you may find other beats. I mean a beat. I mean cantus. I mean firm us. I mean paper. I mean in the kingdom, which is coming, which is here in discovery. It is also Om Shri Maitreya. You don't go across my vibes, but with them, losing the pronoun. It is thy. It is thee. It is I. It is me. Machines are metal. They serve us. We take care of them. This is to me, and this is to you. You say you to me, and I say you to you. Some machines are very delicate. They are precise. They are not big metal stampers. She made enough poetry to keep her company. My vibes. You intercepted my vibes. The long shadows, the long shadows, the long shadows. My sweet little tone is my arm. On what only? The song that girl sang, the song that girl sang, the song that girl sang.
Wow, that's Joanne Kyger. Okay, so what we're going to do, everybody's smiling. What we're going to do is we're going to roughly divide the topics, and I'm going to ask for random raising hand, although Gabi's going to start. Sorry, Gabi. We're going to divide the conversation it's impossible to divide a conversation into the topics of this poem, but we're going to roughly do it. We're going to first talk about pronouns. Then we'll talk about machines and machinery. Then we'll talk about song, singing. And finally, we'll talk about what revolution has to do with any of this. Okay? So pronouns, machinery, song, singing, and revolution. Gabi, start us off on pronouns, and I'm going to ask Knar and Davy just to follow up on any quick thoughts about the way pronouns work here. Gabi, okay. Sorry to spring that on you.
Oh, I'm absorbing your topic list. It's like, all right, pronouns. Okay. Well, I think what I want to say, the direct line to go to, right, is in the second stanza, which, so it is also Om Shri Maitreya, you don't go across my vibes, but with them, comma, losing the pronoun, and then we get this sort of series. It is thy, it is thee, it is me. And that kind of starts to organize the poem after that moment. But weirdly, what I think I want to do, which maybe it will be a bad task as the first commenter, because slightly earlier to the play on the phrase cantus firmus, cantus firm us. So here we get like a serious kind of pronoun play on a phrase. The cantus firmus is a musical term for when you take basically an original pre-existing melody and then you set another melody to it to create a counterpoint with it. So basically if I took, row, row, row your boat, and then I was singing like some original thing on it that would counterpoint with it, and that created a new song. It's a very like Gregorian chant technique. But so it has this sort of idea of revolution and sort of reincarnation that's all over this poem, but in a very sort of like precise technical sense. But to break it into firm us, cantus, to have this kind of like we that sort of haunts it. I don't know, it does something, and it sets us on a set of priorities, right, as this poem starts, that I think is like disorienting, sort of interesting, and clearly has that Buddhist influence. There's my start.
Great start. Thank you, Gabi. So I want to turn to Knar and Davy just for additional thoughts, or take it somewhere else. I mean, losing the pronoun, we're not even sure what it refers to when we get there, but then we get thy and thee, which would be purposely antique and slightly formal, and perhaps associated with theology, and then I and me, which are very different, less formal. Knar, thoughts on pronouns?
Yeah, so I'm sorting out the direct link to pronouns specifically, but I'm looking at a line between the ones we've been looking at, which is I mean paper, I mean in the kingdom, which is coming, which is here in discovery. But it seems like in that moment, we have this kind of restaging of the firm us or the can't us, the us which can't, as in sort of sings and engages in this sort of repetition, right? That maybe dissolves particular pronouns of an individual into something perhaps more collective. But I just loved that kind of line and a half. The which is here in discovery about the kingdom coming, I think is just an amazing way to capture maybe something like prefiguration, right? And prefigurative political lens, wherein, there's a world that's being built, but it's being built right now. And maybe we're not there yet, but there's something about this kind of cantus firmus, I think, that's being invoked. That is the path to that sort of kingdom that is coming. And it has to do with pronouns. I don't have the precise connection, but I'm like, yeah, this definitely has to do with some form of collectivity and dissolution that both kind of respects the multiplicity of people within like the cant or whatever it might be, but there's also just some sort of like merging of voice that happens as well.
Thank you. Davy, this is to me and this is to you. You say you to me and I say you to you. There's all kinds of play there, and the pronouns are either faux trying to be worked out or sincerely trying to be worked out.
I guess I'm on the side of faux trying to be worked out.
Yeah.
And the reason that I feel that way is the first pronoun that we get is the you in the first line. During the beat of this story, you may find other beats, which is to say other beat poets.
The listener, the reader, possibly?
Sure, yeah, you, the listener, the reader, but also, as Gabi was saying, that is to say other melodic lines to superimpose upon the melodic line of this poem. And I find this to be a poem in which what is collective and what is individuated is super unstable. And we're signaled that first sentence of like, you might think that this is a poem written by one beat, but as soon as you hear resonances with other beats, the idea of like singular authorship for someone in community, which we know that really mattered to Kyger. Kyger is like thinking in and with a communal space, a communal practice of poets. What is individual authorship? What is an exchange? And the other moment that helps me think about pronouns is in the third stanza. Machines are metal, they serve us, we take care of them. And there are these reciprocal pairs that then comes back in the next line. You say you to me and I say you to you, which is to say if I'm addressing Chris, I say, what did someone call you on the phone? I would use the second person to say that I'm in relation to Chris. Chris would use the second person to say that he's in relation to me. And that kind of relation between people is being compared to or set up as a parallel with our relationship to machines, which I'm super curious as to whether people are going to say about, because I feel unsure as to what to do with that. But thinking about exchange and relation is something that I think pronouns are encouraging us to do in this poem.
Fabulous. Before we turn to machines, I'm going to invite Lily and Allie to comment on the machine here. I want to turn to Kate, and I want to ask Kate what she makes of I mean a beat, I mean cantus, I mean firm us, I mean paper, I mean etc. The reason I ask Kate is because there's nobody who has thought more about what it means for a poet to say I mean than Kate Colby. So, Kate, what is Joanne doing there? And what is the meta quality of this? Shouldn't you just write a line that you mean rather than say I mean? Because frankly, I could go around all day and say I mean, put I mean as a prefix in front of every statement I make, and I would be simply emphasizing the fact that I mean something, which is obvious. Kate, what's your experience with this?
I mean, so much about this poem is about making and blurring distinctions, and I think that's what the topic of pronouns is doing here too. A pronoun exists to make or reinforce a distinction. And throughout the poem, she's sort of setting up and then blurring distinctions. So by the time you get to losing the pronoun and the thy, thee, I, me, and moving on from there, I get this very kind of Whitmanian feeling of every atom that belongs to me is good belongs to you. And so, but early on with the I means, she's sort of self-qualifying and making distinctions and making finer points that she then kind of undoes. So I see her doing both those things through the poem, like defining things and then blurring or blowing up those definitions. And by the end, just to go back to the pronouns, and I'm not great on grammar and parts of speech, but that in the song That Girl Sang, it was unclear to me reading it whether that goes with the song or the girl, and it was interesting to hear her read it because I believe she emphasized the song That Girl Sang, so that that distinguished the girl, not the song. Or I might have that backwards, but anyway, I don't know if I answered the question.
You did, and I want to invite Laynie to join me in a little riffing on this thing of I mean, partly in deference to, in honor of Kate's fabulous book, which is called I Mean, which is a long poem, in which probably 97% of the lines start with I mean. Let's do a lightning round riff, Laynie. Like, what are some of the things I mean could mean? I'll start. I mean, and that could mean I really am like a parent to a child. I mean, you need to clean this room up.
You're serious.
You're serious.
Is what
okay.
that means.
Your
Okay.
turn.
I mean could also mean that what I just said one sentence ago wasn't exactly right, and I'm modifying it, or I'm backpedaling because of the response I'm getting to
My
I mean.
turn. I mean could mean literally and sincerely. I'm explaining myself.
Yeah.
Your turn.
I mean could be another beat in the poem, like I'm
Yes.
stalling for time and I don't
Yes.
know what to say next, so I'm going to say
Yes.
I mean.
And that might be, Kate, back to you in a second, Kate, on this. That might be what's meant by I mean, because what you do by separating beat, cantus, firm, us, paper, kingdom, etc., is to create a beat by using a meta-poetic phrase, I mean, all right? So during the beat of the story, you might find other beats. I mean a beat. I mean cantus. I mean firmus. I mean paper. I mean the kingdom, etc. Kate, final thought on I mean before we turn to Lily and Allie to talk about machine.
Well, it also has and again, it's a kind of a Whitmanian gesture. It's a listing quality where it's like, I mean this, I mean that, I mean this, and I also mean
Right,
that, where
right.
she's collecting the world around her and sort of, incorporating it into the self and vice versa.
Yes. So in a way, a kind of meaning version of pointing to the world. Okay, so we have machines just literally appear weirdly. Machines are metal. It's almost Steinian the way this happens. They serve us. We take care of them, etc. Why are machines in there, Lily?
A couple thoughts. One, with this line that could either be the title or the subtitle, Notes from the Revolution. When you usually, like colloquially in English, I guess, when you say the revolution, we kind of think about workers' revolutions and revolutions about labor.
So it's industrial.
An industrial revolution. And so that, just in terms of image association, it's very clear to see like why you would jump to thinking about machines and what they're made of, metal, because in a revolution, we're starting with what we see and then trying to draw lines back to what it's made out of, kind of. And then was it Williams who said that a poem is a machine?
Yeah, I mean, he and others of his era, his generation, were obsessed with turning machinery into something that should be thought of as natural.
Yeah, so I don't know that that's how she is employing it here, but maybe it's there seems to be there's a distinction. Some machines are very delicate, and then we jump right to poetry at the end of that stanza. So
Yeah.
I think she's talking about that idea, but I don't think she's subscribing to it necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, it's got the same tone maybe as Stein in A Long Dress, which talks a lot about machinery, but also about values that come and go. Thank you. Allie, a thought on why machines appear here?
Yeah, I keep thinking about what Davy said about reciprocity, and the kind of like parallel between machines are metal, they serve us, we take care of them, and what's happening with the pronouns. And so I guess like part of my reading of this like machine discussion, which is largely born out of confusion, is reading the first, like establishing machines as metal is a way to kind of offset or like help surprise us when she goes on to say some machines are very delicate, they are precise. And what seems to be kind of like running through this is like some thought about communication and what's happening between the you and the me. And so to end that with, she made enough poetry to keep her company, which also kind of evokes this kind of like communicating with the self. I don't know. It's, there's a kind of like undermining of what she's established machines to be by the end of this discussion about the machines.
Yeah. Thank you. We're going to turn to the singing, the song, the singer, the girl, and we're going to ask, good luck, Amber Rose and Camara, on what only, the final line, the song that girl sang, the song that girl sang. And just above that, Amber Rose, my sweet little tone is my arm. And it begins with beat. So there's song, there's music. What do you make of it? I love Mod Po because we don't know what we're going to say before we say it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I truly am unsure, but what I can say, so I'm going to start with my sweet little tone. My sweet little tone is my arm. And what I'm trying to put together is, I mean, the arm is what we use to reach out. It's what we use to grab things. It's what we use to pick them up, to bring things closer to us. Once we start training, it's actually the legs, but that's a separate conversation.
We'll have to learn about that.
But here, the sweet little tone or the song is what allows the speaker to reach out and touch and interact with another person, another thing. It's the physical moment of that interrelation that she seems to be kind of dealing with throughout the whole piece. And my only thought, I'm really kicking the last line over to Camara, but my only thought on the song that girl sang, I noticed that in this version of the written text, it's twice the song that girl sang. And in the recording, it was 3 times. And so there was something about that final line that exceeds the like careful precision of how this poem is put together. And then it's really the song that kind of takes up the ideas and turns them into something that exceeds the page, exceeds precision. And so that takes me back to the title, that after all of these kind of moments of figuring out the relations between people, between metals, between me and you, there's something ephemeral about the song that's actually what allows us to reach out and touch one another.
Fantastic. Really good start. Zach, would you, Kamara's like, I can't wait to say something about this. Zach, would you show those watching on YouTube the group view, whatever it's called? What is that called?
There
what
we
do we
go.
call it? Yes. Okay. I want everybody to wave your hand if, when you were thinking about, Knar's already waving her hand. If you were, when you heard about all the singing and a girl singing and the beat, right, and tone, sweet tone. There's another musical word in here, vibes, right? When you heard that, you first thought, oh, this is a poem. Poems are traditionally sung. the ancient idea of a poem is that it's sung. It is often a muse singing. It is often a girl singing. If you thought of that wave, okay, a few abstentions, mostly here in the room. Lily, we've been, of course, reading Bergvall, who was very interested in this, but does this help us at all? And then we're going to turn to Camara.
Yes, because I think okay, so I think I've got it. So she talks about the machines, and some are very delicate. I think that she's talking about a record player in the last
Yeah, it
couple
seems
stanzas.
to be in that last. And
Right,
also
and-
the sweet little, the tone is my arm. Yep.
The tone
Yeah.
arm is the
Lily's
piece
got
that
it.
you pull over to the record and then either push down or like the button goes down. And if you look at a record player, it has a certain look to it that's kind of substantial, but then if you really look at the piece that's reading the music itself, it's extremely small and delicate needle, and that can get really bent and cause really strange distortions. And so what I imagine was like she's talking about the contradictions that machine holds, and then those last lines are like a skip in the record, which is when there's something kind of breakdown between the groove in the record and how the needle is pressed, so it's repeating that line over and over.
Wow, love that reading. Love that reading. Camara, you have a bit of a reprieve, because what's going to happen now is we're going to take a phone call, and Camara and Jason will be tasked with responding to whatever the phone caller asks or says. Yay. And who do we have on the phone, Chris?
I just wanted to give a quick shout out. I was talking to Robin a little bit earlier, who was calling in from Maryland, but then that conversation, we
Okay,
moved
hello,
on.
Robin.
But we have on the line now Amy calling from Maryland also.
Oh,
to say
Maryland
hello.
is the thing.
I know,
301. Props, 301. Hi, Amy. How are you?
Hi, I'm good and happy to be calling in today.
That's great. It's good to hear from you. You're not so far away. You should have gotten in your car and hung out with us.
That would have been great.
Yeah, you're welcome to do that. So, have you been following along with this Kyger poem?
I have also really enjoyed the Tonkas.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Thanks.
I had a question, which is kind of just a general free-floating question. When I first called in this morning, I noticed that the line here says ModPo Live Webcast Spring 2022. And when you started talking about the Tonkas, it brought up all kinds of images for me of spring, things growing, coming out of the darkness. And I first came to ModPo in the first year of the pandemic. And so whenever I do ModPo things, I think about how that was such a great thing for me during that period of isolation. And I just wondered if you guys picked these poems because they were spring-like, or whether that's just something coincidental for me.
Wow, I love the nexus of things you just said, Amy. That makes me very happy. You were thinking about the benighted fall of 2020, weren't you? And that was really hard for us. And yes, we do love spring poems. Unfortunately, the spring of 2021 didn't deliver us from the pandemic. We had to wait somewhat for 22. But whatever, let's just be vernal when we can be vernal. Before I turn it over to Camara and Jason for a response to what you're saying, and also Laynie, who curated the poems and might have something to say about spring, I would invite you to pick a book that we will give to you, since we did promise books. So there are two options here. One, oh gosh, if you don't pick mine, I'll be sad, but that's all right. We have two options here, Zach. Oh, Zach's not there. We have this amazing book by Larissa Lai, which is a book-length poem called Iron Goddess of Mercy. Amazing. Or my really dull academic book on the year 1960.
Not dull.
You really set it up.
It's not dull.
Amy, pick one and we will mail it to you. I'm serious.
Now I feel like I'm on the spot.
I really didn't want to put you on the spot. You know what? I'm going to send you both books.
I would be very grateful.
Are you a reader? Are you going to read?
For both books.
You're going to read these?
Yes,
Great.
I will read
All right. Will you give Chris Martin your home address off the air so we're not all mailing things to you? And thanks for the call, Amy. And by the way, stick around for the fall of 21 because it'll be our symposium mode starting on, did I say 21? 22. Repeat. But the arm is broken, Lily, as it were. Yeah, and so give Chris your address and we'll mail you the books. And you can listen to our responses after you hang up. Good?
Yes, thank you so much, Al.
Okay,
and
thank you,
everybody
Amy.
there.
Thanks for being part of the ModPo community. Okay, so Camara and Jason, you kind of got off the hook because Amy's talking about ModPo and the pandemic and her experience and spring poems, and say anything you like briefly, and then we'll turn to Laynie. Camara?
Yeah, I really like these thoughts from Amy. Thank you. It also reminds me of something I say growing up outside Chicago, that like the first day where it's like 45 degrees or something, I remember people in middle school would be wearing out the skirts and we would just be looking at everything and noticing spring like it was like we hadn't seen it for every year of our life, and it just felt different seeing it every single year. And that sort of story reminded me of what Davy was saying earlier about the routine of attention, that I think both of these poems kind of speak to. And the last thing I kind of wanted to say is that attentiveness to springtime also reminds me that both of these poems think about like notes and moments and specificities in a very small way, that also sort of reminds me of springtime. And I really appreciated the springtime connections.
Thank you, Camara. Jason, quickly in response to Amy, and then Laynie will briefly tell us why she picked these poems, possibly in relation to spring. And then we're going to turn to the theme of revolution and wrap up. Jason.
Yeah, thanks so much, Amy, for calling in and taking that brave step, and for your questions. I think that, well, as someone, I lived in Tucson for a while, where it was the first time being someone from entirely the East Coast, the Northeast of the US and Upper Canada. It's the first time I experienced seasonlessness. And I think that since it seems pretty rooted in Los Angeles, for Mullen, we also get a sense of a kind of permanent, it's a garden that is ever flourishing, like due to the massive diversion of water into Los Angeles. So I think that certainly the garden is a spring-like thing, and I think that with it's been a long time, notes from the revolution, I'm really, the word I was really drawn to is vibes. And I think that in terms of ModPo's kind of power during the pandemic, kind of has to do with the ModPo vibes. in the sense that this poem is talking about, because I think that like the phrase Amstri Maitreya is a mantra that's used to kind of summon this prophesied Buddha that has not yet come to earth, that is going to usher in a kind of period of total selflessness and of non-distinction as well between people. So I think that the kind of repetition of vibes through the poem, which is like a kind of strangely like it's a word that, like, the more I pay attention to the kids and the youth, like everyone is using the word vibes. It's like a very crisp and current word. But and the verb is to like vibing. But vibes, like music and like shadows, are things that they're vibrations that emanate from a person or a place or from a thing that if you're in the, in the circle where the vibes are present, you will resonate with those same vibes. So
Great.
if I say, oh, they have really good vibes, part of it is that it impacts me, and my vibes impact you. So like vibes are like song or like shadows. They extend beyond the self, but especially like sound, they're vibrations.
Yeah, there's a lot of sound here. I mean, Lily's reading helps us with that. Vibes comes from vibrations. Vibrations are sounds. And if you are on the same wavelength as me, which would be a thought, a 60s era thought. So in the interest of time, Laynie, I want to switch from spring, because I think Amy got a good response. And let's go to revolution. So this is, even though it was collected in selected poems in 2002, this goes back to the 60s. This is a poem that is in the style and spirit of the revolutionary time. Kyger was not only a political leftist, and in that sense interested in the potential political revolutions of the period, but it was also part of the cultural, I almost said counter-revolution, the cultural revolution. So I'm going to ask real quick lightning round, anybody just nod at me so I can see that you have something to say about this. Where do we find revolution in this poem, and how are these, if notes is to be read as musical, where do we find notes, sounds, vibes from the revolution? They could be tonal, they could be idiomatic, as we've been talking about just now. Jason helped us with that. Hey, you've intercepted my vibes, man. Like, I was on this wavelength, but you messed me up. Okay? So Gabi looks like, yes. Thought on where you locate revolution, and we're all going to make these quick.
Okay, what I want to say is what's interesting about how revolution shows up here is that it's in both of its meanings of total change and repetition. So a revolution like a revolution of the planet, or a revolution like change the society totally. And so you have things like the Maitreya, the future Buddha, you have the Cantus Firmus, you have the sort of kingdom to come, that all signal both repetition of something that has been already there and total change. And so in that sense, I feel like this is not the kind of poem that's like, revolution, change everything, nothing's working, we need everything new, we need to imagine horizons or whatever. It's not that kind of a poem. It's actually significantly much more ambivalent in the sense that it actually is kind of like curious about repetition or forms of doing again. There you go.
Love that. Love that. And particularly when you get to, if it's the 60s and you're dealing with revolutionary politics and you start valuing the sweet little tones, that's going to sound almost reactionary. Don't give me that sweet little tone stuff. Don't do little music. So there's real ambivalence here. Okay, I'm looking to nodders. Davy, revolution where? Where do we find it?
I mean, this is really just to say that, Lily, your reading changed my life. And that one place we see revolution is because this is a poem about, as Lily taught me, a record player, and record players revolve, such that the revolution that is being discussed here is perhaps just the revolution of a skipping record, which is to say that in the second stanza, you don't go across my vibes, but with them, is to say that not moving from element to element of the record, moving from the various grooves in the record. A friend of mine makes records, and I really wish he were here because he'd be able to.
Vinyl?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, he does. He presses them. And you're losing the pronoun because the record is skipping. You don't know what the record is saying, such that during the beat of the story, you may find other beats because the record is skipping. If the beat of the story is the song as it was intended, we're getting a different version of the song because we're getting it distorted. that the revolution itself, if a record skips, then the revolution it expected to take is distorted, is a different shape than it was intended to be.
So it's metallically meta because it's really when you say you want a revolution, well, we all want to change the world, which is also an ambivalent song that also skips on the record, Revolution number 9. So this is really kind of like consonant with what the Beatles are trying to figure out to do about pressing all that vinyl, and is that the aesthetic or is that the political? I really like where that's going. All right, let's take 2 more nodders. Laynie's a nodder.
So the revolution is also in the poetry that kept her company and in the machine that could potentially print the writing that's being written. But I'm also hearing it in a really...
Like a press, like a printing press.
Right. The revolution happens in song, in many voices. And so when one person starts with one beat, that allows others to join in. So once you hear the song, you join the song. So revolution is in the song, but also singing invokes the revolution.
Nice. And that helps with beginning, which is to say, look, I got my revolution, you got your revolution. We're going to go round and round on this. This is what poetry does at its best. During the beat of this story, you may find other beats, but I mean, and I mean, and I mean. Okay, let's take one more on revolution, then we're going to have a lightning round of final thoughts. I have a scheme for us for that. So I'm looking. I don't see any revolutionists.
Kate wanted to say something.
Kate,
I think.
Kate, revolution, where, how?
Oh, I wanted to return to the jettisoning of pronouns, and with it the hierarchies, the subordinations of grammar that creates this anti-capitalist pooling of phenomena that the poem evinces. So what she's doing on the page manifests this kind of combination of hierarchical elements.
Beautiful. Thank you, Laynie, and thank you for choosing this poem. There is a poem talk about this poem, and I kind of want to say that it belongs probably with the beats because that's the closest in Modpo, because that's the closest we can come for Joanne. And Joanne would not have protested much. In fact, this poem was written, probably Creeley was on the other side of the room, in that wonderful town of theirs. And so it belongs there, but it also belongs across Modpo because it is a perfect kind of poem that doesn't do much semantically, but is all about its poetics and what it's saying about the poem as a sound and the poem as a gesture and the poem as rhetoric. And that's what we do best here, is to deal with poems like that. It is our hope that people watching on YouTube will have started thinking about this poem and thought, I don't know how these people are going to deal with this. And the fact is that scarily we didn't think anything but that ourselves. And here we come up with something I think pretty good. So thank you.